And that's why I believe in you, because that is the greatest purpose. It's to love. Honest. It sounds corny, whatever you want to say. I don't care. I love people because there is freedom and power in loving people.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality, and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the one who will be here with you each and every Wednesday, interviewing a different consciousness changemaker that is also out there working tirelessly to help catalyze change and expand awareness all across Spaceship Earth. On the other 4 weekdays, you can hear me discussing topics such as my favorite thought-provoking quotes, reading and discussing wisdom from empowering books, playing clips from various inspirational spiritual teachers, sharing a bit of mysterious news, taking questions from the audience, and essentially digging into any other mind-expansive topics that will help keep your soul fed by tuning you into positive vibrations on a consistent basis. And you guys have heard me say that if I ever run ads on the show, it will only be with a company that I fully support because I believe their intention is to make a positive difference in the world. Well, I'm pleased to announce that day has arrived and that this episode of the Positive Head Podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's interview episode, I'm very pleased to have Mike Bledsoe here with me on the show. Mike is a host of the hugely popular fitness podcast, Barbell Shrugged, also an entrepreneur. Hey there, Mike. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Brandon. Thanit's for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this quite some time. We have some mutual friends, and it's excellent to have someone, especially a fellow podcaster with who's created so much success for themselves. But before I dig into all that, I'm going to start off with the same question I always start off with. You're in an elevator. The guy next to you looks over. You have 10 floors to answer. He says, "What's your passion?" What do you say?
My passion is waking people up to their own potential and to their higher selves. And if I can then move them and help them achieve unconditional love for themselves and for those around them, that would be a huge plus.
It all makes sense why you're on the show now.
Oh yeah, the mutual friends. Yeah, I mean, when 2 or 3 friends say, "Hey, you should go on the show," I don't even ask any questions. I just say yes.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. One of those friends, Tim Powers, actually has sent over a few people. Tim, he's like all over the place, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, it'll be 2 a.m. and I'll get that text and like, check your calendar. And I think that's what happened in this case. So I've definitely gotten excited about those texts because they're always amazing. They're always like amazing people. So it's such a pleasure to meet you, my friend.
I don't know how many times I've been just wandering around in a strange city at 2 a.m. and I run into Tim Powers.
I know, huh? He's
in 3D. I'm like, there he is.
You know, my ex used to talk about it. He would just swing through our place every now and then. You know, every few months he'd drop in out of nowhere, and she was like, you know, he always gives me that perspective on what an ass I can be when I get down and, like, you know, stuck in the mundane perspective of the grind of my life. Comes this guy, and he's just like vibrating at this incredible frequency, so grateful, and in every little moment, every little thing, he's just got this huge smile, and so yeah. I definitely appreciate him for who he is and the example that he sets for us all.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those people. And I think everybody should try to find a person like this in their life where you can just go grab a meal with that person afterwards. You feel like you've leveled up. You're like, oh,
yeah, totally.
This is like, this guy showed me what it means to love other people like more openly. Okay, I can be more open now. I'm just going to practice. I'm going to do what he did. Awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Mike, tell me a little bit. You have a lot going on. I mean, your show, when he first told me about you and that we need to connect, I was like so impressed by what you've done and the show that you've created and, all the success. And I'd love, I guess, maybe give us a little background on your story, if you would.
Yeah, man, it's hard to know where to start. I think most people do know me due to my show. It's, we have a show that we also put on. It's a podcast and it's also a video show, and we post it on YouTube, and we have a lot of subscribers and we have a lot of followers, and most people know me from that. And it's interesting that, I started the show because, and the show is actually mostly geared for CrossFitters. People who are in CrossFit or weightlifting, and that's the background I came from. I owned a CrossFit gym in Memphis, Tennessee, and
oh, really? I went to college right outside of Memphis.
Oh,
a really little Christian school that I got kicked out of called Freed-Hardeman University. Ever heard of it by any chance?
No,
it's really little. It's like an hour away, but
I did a semester at Crichton College.
Okay. Yeah. Is that somewhere in the area? No.
That's like a Christian college over there pretty much. Yeah, it didn't work out.
Interesting. There you go. There's a cool synchronicity. We both got kicked out of a small Christian school in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, guys. This is like, want to learn how to fail at college? You listen to this podcast.
Oh, man. No, I was running a gym there, and we were doing well. We were good at what we were doing. I had this background in strength and conditioning, and we were doing well in CrossFit, and I was studying business, and I was doing a lot better than a lot of other gyms were doing with their facilities as well. And so I ended up on the phone a lot. A lot of people were calling me with questions like, how are you doing what you're doing? Your athletes are performing well. Your business is performing well. How do you do it? And I found myself just on the phone hours a week giving free advice. I was like a coach and a consultant over the phone before I realized that was a thing that you would charge people for. And so
right.
I guess I didn't know that much about business. And so I was like, you know what? Instead of me taking all these one-on-one calls, I'll just start a show. We'll just start a podcast. And it was the culmination of having one of my guys, he came and interned for me at the gym, and he was like, oh, you should listen to the Joe Rogan show. And because I'd been listening to podcasts that were super content rich and kind of boring unless you were just unless you love biochemistry,
Right.
And I listened to Joe Rogan one time and I go, oh, you mean you can do anything you want on a podcast?
Right.
Give it to me. I want it. So I started doing it with a few friends and we decided to video it. And one of the things that I think helped make it really popular in the beginning was the fact that we always went with quality. High quality video, high quality audio. And I think that went a long way back in the days when it was hard to do that. Back in 2011, 2012, it was not easy to create high quality audio and video. And now, it's, kind of par for the course. So,
right.
I got into podcasting that way. And then I built some businesses based off of those shows. So one's for, fitness enthusiasts and one's for entrepreneurs who are in the fitness industry. So I got into that. And what's interesting is by doing those shows, when I would say that I was a person who was not quite awake when I started those shows. And the show was actually part of the process and my awakening in that I was put under a microscope. You know this is when you do a podcast and you put your voice out for the entire world to hear, things start changing. You start saying things differently. There's certain things that I just simply stopped talking about because I didn't want it to accidentally slip out on a microphone at some point. There's certain words I stopped using. And I became hyper aware of the language I used. And something really cool happens when your language changes. So does the way you think. And yes. And so there was
now.
this,
Do you know Mark England as well?
No.
Okay, because that's someone I met through Tim, who Procabulary, and did a podcast. One of my first podcasts was with Mark. So as soon as you said that, I started thinking. I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if you guys knew each other because I met him through Tim.
Procabulary.
Yeah. You should check him.
Awesome.
Yeah, it is. You should check him out. Definitely an interesting character. And yeah, it's his whole thing is like, hey, it's spelling. You're casting a spell when you use words. It's like it's all vibrational. It's all energy. So
no doubt. I have another friend. Actually, I think she'd be great for the show. I'll tell you about her later. But she says the same thing, like casting a spell and spelling.
Yeah.
Like, no doubt about it.
It's like,
and in fact, now it's funny. I've been hyper aware about my vocabulary and about just how I say things for, I'd say 5 years now. And I'm still finding tons of things that I could be saying differently or not saying at all. Or,
right.
That's usually the case. It's what you're not saying at all that can be extremely helpful. So, that was one of the steps, was becoming hyper aware of what I was saying. Really started shifting things for me. And then another thing happened for me was through the podcasting, was being introduced to people who are the best at what they do. And what happens is when you start running into people who are the best at what they do, it's usually people who are actually living within their purpose. Because when you're doing the thing you're supposed to be doing, that's when you're the best at what you do. That's a genius. Everyone has a genius inside of them. And it's, for most people, it's just not realized because they're not doing the thing they were put on earth to do. And the moment they start stepping into that, they're now considered brilliant and a genius and all this stuff. And these are the people that I'm interacting with, because my job is to highlight and spotlight people who are special. And I find myself, and I always do my show in person, in fact, and that is my intention. Ultimately, I definitely, within the year, I want to start doing exactly what you're doing: video in person. Yes.
Getting that sort of FaceTime must be extra special.
It is extra special because you and I are going to get an hour here, and I get to know you, and I live really close to where you're at, and we'll probably drop in and grab some tea or coffee at some point, and that'll be amazing. And for me, I got to do that with every person I interviewed. And for every person I interviewed, it wasn't just an hour of time with them. I was spending an entire day with them. And we would grab a meal before and after. And you know that when you break bread with somebody, that's a whole
different thing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a whole different thing. And so, I've got hundreds of episodes of interviews where I got to break bread with people who are the best at what they do, which means that I got to be pretty close to God in a way. They were in line with their purpose. And I'm just like, oh. So there's definitely that element as well. So I'm changing my language. I'm around people who are living in their purpose. And then I go to like a marketing conference, and they're talking about this thing called empathy. And I have a lot of trouble with that back in, 3-4 years ago. I say 4 years ago, it was a challenge. And I'm also former military. So there's a bit of, it's hard to keep the empathy intact in that environment a lot of times. It gets covered up a little bit. So, and that's not the only thing. It's always a choice, right? So it's, I'm not going to blame a thing. I just want to highlight that does happen with veterans a lot of times, is empathy can be a challenge. So,
you're taught to be so like, inside this kind of box, and anything outside of it is like weak or not what it should be. And that's the whole purpose, is kind of brainwashing military into, this soldier, this perfect kind of.
We don't have time for it either. It's like always urgent, always important, always urgent. You have feelings? Cool. Let's worry about that later.
Yeah, right. Right.
It's be stoic and so on and so forth. So I think that the most mature warriors are very in touch and empathetic, and it's an immature warrior that isn't. And there's definitely guys in the military that are very empathetic, However, it's not the status quo, and it's not what's being taught. That's for sure. So I would say, if you look at certain warrior cultures of the past, it was a huge component. In our modern military, not so much. So I went to a marketing conference. I guess I'm like just rolling into my story, but
all of it.
But I'm like, I want to be a better businessman. I want to know marketing better. And I go and I'm like really good at everything except for this empathy thing. My empathy worksheets are empty, and and I'm frustrated. I'm so frustrated. So in fact, it was a 7-day conference, and in the middle was the empathy stuff. I actually took the next day off and just went and watched a movie because I just couldn't. I just was having a mind melt. And but it hit me. I go, I'm supposed to eat mushrooms when I get home. Like magic mushrooms. And and I didn't really have any experience with it. So.
And you just had people been coming at you telling you, do this? No? Really?
No.
Wow.
It was an intuitive hit. Like I knew a guy who had them, and I was always kind of like, that's a weird hippie thing to do. And,
right.
And it's not for me.
That's for people like Tim Powers.
That's right. Exactly. But there was a couple of things that kind of like triggered it. There were a couple of things that triggered it, and I'm definitely an early adopter type of person. If someone says don't do it, like don't push this red button, I'm like, I'm going to push the red button. And
totally.
So society's telling me, hey, don't push this fucking red button. I'm like, I'm pushing the red button. So I go home and I push the red button and or red pill or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And all this empathy stuff came running in.
Wow.
And it really, in fact, I was actually on the cusp of divorce. So my wife and I were both just at the end. And it was so funny is I'll just share with you the empathy piece that happened during the journey. I got lucky. I chose the right music. I highly recommend if you're going to do something like this, go somewhere where it can be facilitated, and there's a lot of places outside the country that can happen.
More and more too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's easier to find more now than ever. So, it's worth doing a facilitated session because you can go way deeper. Trust me. And there's a lot of benefits to it, and it gets rid of any risks that might be associated. So, but I did that. And what happened was I'm on the top of this hill at this park, and it's a dog park and it's huge. So I see all these people getting off work at like 5 or 6 PM, and they're bringing their dogs to the dog park, and they're on their phones. Or they're texting and they're throwing a stick or a tennis ball and their dog's going to get it. And the dog's coming back and forth. And I can tell the dog is frustrated. I can tell that the dogs are like,
you're probably feeling what the dog's feeling way more than you normally would.
Exactly. I'm like, I can tell that these dogs are like, I've been in a cage for the last 8-10 hours.
Right.
And now you're not even going to give me your full attention. You're on your phone. And I could feel the dog's frustration. I'm on top of this hill going, I'm getting angry. I'm like, I can't believe you. And then it hits me. I go, oh shit. I do the same thing to my dog.
Right.
And I go,
hypocrite.
Yes. And then I go, I do the same thing to my wife. I do the same thing to my mom, my siblings, my clients, my employees, my business partners. I don't listen to anybody.
Right.
And I go, and I go home and I sit down with my wife and I listen to her and ask her questions, and I sit and I give her my full undivided attention for the first time in our relationship. She thought something was wrong. And
right.
Without me even saying a thing, just the fact that I was asking questions and listening, she just started crying. She just couldn't even understand what was happening. And, from that, at that point, it was transformation. And I was even a little afraid that night. I was like, I'm going to go to bed and this is going to wear off, and I woke up the next morning and it didn't wear off. And the next day, it never wore off. It was an understanding. It was a learning that happened that I wasn't going to forget. And it wasn't like something that was a chemical that got changed in my brain. It was like, no, I actually learned something and my behavior changed and it felt really good. And, and so I would say those are like the three really big things that contributed to me having a big wake up moment where I was able to take full responsibility for my own actions, my own self, my own feelings, and also to realize that we're all connected and, you know, and behave that way. Not just
act as if.
Yeah, not just intellectually understand it, but to embody it into I like that, act as if. That's really cool.
Yeah, I always say, you know, and you may have heard this before, everywhere you go, you're there waiting for yourself. And when you can take that and really apply that to your interactions, it's such a game changer. You know, all is literally one, act accordingly. You take some of those foundational concepts and plug them into your brain. And that's exactly, if I had a nickel for every time someone told me I did mushrooms for the first time and I had a transformational experience that I never came back from in a good way, it seems like that is almost like the gatekeeper for so many people. Right. You know, there's a lot of things. There's LSD, there's ayahuasca, there's a lot of different plant medicines that, you know, I'm sure at this point, well, we've talked a little bit about it, that you've experimented with, I've experimented with, but it seems like that one really is like a, you know, bringing people through the gate and having that first experience where they're changed in a way that they never go back. It seems like I just hear it over and over and over again. I had this first mushroom experience, you know?
Yeah, and, I think they're not as scary as say ayahuasca, because, you know, people think about ayahuasca and they think about flying into the jungle of Peru and sitting with this guy who doesn't speak English and
right. And the alien comes out of the clouds and picks you up and
yeah, and you know, I've done that, but
that was step 2. That was like
step 2. Yeah, that might have been like step 3 or 4, but you know,
yeah, exactly, yeah, totally.
So the I think mushrooms are readily available, and because they're so massively available that people aren't as afraid of them, because everyone
they're natural. They're natural. It's not like, you know, you think of LSD. It's like, what is this thing created in a lab by some, you know, weird scientist?
And that's actually I in my experience and everything that I've done so far, I think LSD is very advanced.
It's pretty incredible.
I don't think it's for the people who are new. I think it's something to be done after you've spent a lot of time with the plants, the natural things. Like mushrooms are so natural. There's so much safety in it. It's fairly gentle. A lot of people who have been in ceremony with mushrooms, they don't think it's gentle. But once they've experienced something like ayahuasca, then they look back and go, that was gentle. So,
right.
You know, it's all relative. But yeah, mushrooms are readily available. You can get them almost anywhere. You know, somebody's got them somewhere in some town. You can do them on your own, even though I don't recommend it. And I think the biggest turnoff for people around that is, you know, they had some type of experience in college where they had 12 beers and then they sprinkled some mushrooms on top, and then they had this terrible experience. And I go, well, you didn't have a mushroom experience. You had a drunken experience where you happen to have some other substances in your system and it wasn't intentional, and it's highly problematic. And that's the biggest problem that I see that people have, is their first impression can sometimes be really skewed, and they don't even they don't even put the pieces together. There was alcohol involved in that whole situation.
Right. Yeah, it's you know, it seems like you made a very good point. It's the setting the intention with it. So anyone out there who hasn't experimented and is interested in experimenting, I think, Mike, your advice is excellent. It's like, find a container where someone can help sort of guide you, if possible. Certainly not everyone has that sort of experience, but if it's going to be on your own outside of that sort of container, at least have the intention set. Certainly leave the 12 beers alone. Have really good music, or have really, you know, calming, you know, good setting is always important.
Yes.
And Yeah, it's definitely a medicine, and so that was sort of the first big one for you. I mean, it's an interesting, it's so different than my own perspective was. A long time really being, reading a lot of materials, spiritual materials and things like that, and ultimately coming to and applying that to business, applying that to, my podcast. I think it's really interesting. It's like your journey is sort of the other way around. It's like you started doing these things and then learning or, opening up as you went, which, it's quite fascinating. So my question to you at this point is, so you've been on this journey. How long ago did you start your podcast? 2012 or something, did I see? Is that?
It was the very end of 2011, beginning of 2012. I think that's when we actually started posting officially, but I started playing around with the concept in 2011. And we actually, kind of drove our stake in the ground and started posting weekly in early 2012.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like you're sort of going through some of these experiences as you're in the public to some degree. And of course, your reach has gotten further and further and further, which pretty interesting way to do it.
I've had people reach out to me. I've had people reach out to me to go, dude, I've been following you from the beginning. What are you doing? Like, they're like, tell me the secret. I'm like, I'm telling you the secret. Just do the things I'm telling. And don't follow in my footsteps. I mean, but I'm not hiding the tools that I use to get there. Like I just told everybody, in the last 20 minutes, I just told you what's possible. I'm not saying that's exactly what you should do. I'm not telling you need to go start a podcast or you even need to do mushrooms, but it's, they can be beneficial. Those are tools. I mean, and not everything is the right thing for everybody. So use whatever it is that's at your disposal. And if you're looking, then you're on your path and you're in a good spot. So just go easy on yourself, I would say.
That's a huge one. I think that's such we become our own biggest barrier oftentimes. So it's so easy to beat up on ourselves for what we have or haven't done. And, just someone tuning into this material right now, it's like there's someone that's seeking to improve their perspective and sort of expand their consciousness and awareness and learn from others. And it's, that in itself it's a huge success. I think just to be here, just to incarnate in the physical dimension, you have balls, Yeah, no
doubt. Yeah. I think you're hitting on something where going easy on yourself is practicing unconditional love and practicing unconditional love for yourself. And this is on my mind right now because I'm not in the business of life coaching, but I did just, I've taken on a person because it is so much fun. And I just got the call with her before the show and we were talking about unconditional love and what the perspective is on that. I was like, you know what? We're throwing around this word, and I grew up hearing this word in Christian philosophy, and but no one actually did a good job of explaining or defining what it actually was. It's like, oh, are you practicing unconditional love? Sure. What does that even mean? And for me, what I've grown to understand it to be, and actually, I would love to hear your perspective on it. But it is not focusing on what you could do or should do or this or that, but just loving yourself for exactly where you're at right now, not for your potential. And I know that for me personally, and everyone's got their own struggles around how to find unconditional love, but my personal struggle has been around focusing on where I see people's potential and loving them for who they could be versus who they are right now. And doing the same thing to myself, going, I would love myself if I would accomplish these things. And then just come to the realization is no, just love myself exactly for who I am right now, no matter what. Just right here, everything that is a perceived failure or a perceived win is everything. It's just part of who I am. And I'm going to love every bit of that. And I'm going to withhold judgment. And I'm not going to focus on what could have been different or what I can do in the future. I'm a very future-oriented person, And, some people tend to orient themselves in the past. Some people orient themselves in the future. I'm a future person. So I'm always focused on what I could do in the future, which means that there's no way, since I'm not there yet, that I can't love myself right now because I'm not that guy.
Right.
So, for me, the unconditional love, if you're a future oriented person, I hope that you can identify with that and maybe have a shift in perspective around that. And, the unconditional love piece is so huge. And it's so funny is once I had that, that's when a lot of things that were a challenge before became easy. And then the accomplishments kind of came in droves.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your, I'd like to know your perspective on unconditional love.
Yeah. Everything that you said, I completely resonate with. It's understanding that you're my perspective, you're an eternal being that always has been and always will be. You incarnated, I don't know exactly how old you are, however many years ago that you showed up here, you incarnated here, you weren't created then. You're, eternal being, you'll never get it done. Change is guaranteed. It's like, so when you realize you'll never get it done and, change is guaranteed, it's like the journey is the goal. So you've arrived. This is eternity now. This moment is profound and magical and beautiful and special as any other moment has been or will be throughout eternity. And our job becomes to bring that awareness to whatever the moment is. In that mundane act, in that, me struggling to figure out this piece and still, there's more I can envision myself as becoming and doing. But that would mean nothing if I was just automatically there and I didn't have the ride to get there, Yeah. And so when you can bring the perspective of, this struggle or this sort of incomplete version of myself is as important as the next, greatest and greatest version. Now you're really getting somewhere. And I think you're really touching on, unconditional love, self-love. I always say self-love is the number one thing we're all here to learn. When we packed up and said, all right, I'm going in, man, I'm dropping into to 3D. That's like number one on everyone's list is self-love, because until you get that piece, it's hard to do much good for others. And really, ultimately, all of our joy, and you talked about being in line with your sort of what you're meant to do, your greatest purpose, it always is going to in some way involve service to others in some way, shape, or form. Why? Because they're all extensions of you. So your greatest joy is always going to come from helping. I always say you're going to find the opportunity to give away to others what you want for yourself. And that's how you create it for yourself. It's such an interesting, self-love, tricky. In one hand, it's like so simple. And from another, it's like very complex. I guess it's both, but when you really bring the right perspective to it, it's like, wow, I'm perfectly imperfect right as I sit now. Yeah. And this serves what comes next. And what comes next is magical and beautiful and great and wonderful and beyond where I'm at, and from one perspective, but from another, it is no greater. It is just another, facet of the same, being and destiny. Yeah,
totally. And and it's one thing to hear you say that, like, I'm like, oh, yes. And then to go out and live that's the challenge. And
that's the challenge.
And I call it the difference between knowing something that's like the collection of data, and then there's the embodiment of the thing. That's when you've embodied it and now you're living it, right? And so I think living in the 21st century, it's 2016, it's so easy. We've been trained to be data gatherers. From the age of like 5 years old, they stick us in school, and then they sit in a chair for 8 hours a day, and they say, hey, I want you to collect all this data, and I want you to be able to regurgitate it. So now we're like trained to be data collectors that don't actually learn anything. Because and another thing is I like to say, learning is behavior change. It's like, yes, you may know this thing, but you didn't learn it because your behavior didn't change. And so
I like that. That's really powerful.
Yeah. And so we've been taught in school that we've never been taught how to learn. We've learned how to regurgitate information. We collect information and we just store it and we sit on it. Mm-hmm. And I even see it like I'm a businessman, I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been to marketing conferences and business conferences, and I've sat next to that guy who it's his 4th time at this annual conference, and he's still got an idea that he's never acted on. I was like, wow, you haven't learned anything in 4 years.
Right.
Like, you know what? If you just took action on anything, you would get your money's worth, but you're just sitting here collecting information. And that's what we do. That's the pattern that's been set in us by the system, right? And so it's like boom, boom, boom. So once you realize, oh shit, I'm supposed to interrupt this pattern by actually changing my behaviors with the knowledge that I obtain, cool. Now I can embody it. I can cut away the pieces that don't serve me. And when you cut away the pieces of the knowledge and you embody it, that's called understanding. And then you can go into the world with understanding, and somebody who understands something can teach it. And so, and that's the final key to being able to turn around and teach a thing is like the final key or the final step. And having actually learned something, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Giving back. It's like, once again, it's like you're integrating, you're assessing, you're taking in the information, you're learning how to integrate, and then of course now how do I give that back? And I'm fond of the saying, we teach best what we most need to learn. And it's like I always say it on the show. I'm like, guys, I'm so glad that so many of you are getting something positive from this, and it's helping your world. But honestly, there's no selfless act, and I'm doing this first and foremost for myself. And the fact that you benefit is beautiful, and I couldn't love it more. But I need this most of all, so I need to talk about this stuff every day. I need to be mixing it up with people like you who inspire me, and listening to other teachers and information, and then it helps me to. Then, each day to, okay, if I react in a way that's negative now, or fall into a state that's outside of, sort of the broadest perspective I could have, it doesn't take me any time till I'm instantly like viewing myself and like, oh, you're completely out of sync with who and what you truly are. And so I'd like to say I'm a quick learner, but really where this stuff is concerned, I've been pretty slow, man. It's taken a lot of time for me to like curb that person that can get agitated or pissy, or I have this sort of a lot of energy that can really work for me, but it also, that type of personality, and I sense that you're probably the same. You could probably get really agitated at some time, would be my guess, and it takes a while to like, okay, its most important thing is that I'm at peace in this moment, not getting the computer to work, or getting, forcing this widget, this square peg into this round hole.
Yeah,
we really got to reprogram ourselves from doing, because it's been the way most of us live.
And it's interesting that you say like a fast or a slow learner. And when it comes to a lot of this more spiritual stuff, we don't really have any metrics of success.
Right.
Whereas if you're trying to get better at business, I'm like, oh, the money went up and the expenses went down. Yay.
Yeah, or, right.
I'm trying to get in better shape. Oh, wow, I got abs now. Or when I stepped on the scale, it was 30 pounds lighter. Yay, we can celebrate something. But in order to like attach metrics to like spiritual growth, that's very difficult. Actually know some people that are working on that. So
that's a great thought. And I would almost say, just thinking about it, it's a really interesting thing that you point out. It's like, okay, if you had a way to look at how much of the day am I in a peaceful state, and not necessarily even happy all the time, because there are things that are going to come into your story that you don't love, and it's sort of, working through it or what have you, but being at peace, how much of the day am I at peace? And if you can find a way to measure that, and then sort of, in our world, we're so used to like these sort of feedback loops, someone working on that that's definitely smart.
Yes. You want to hear my latest, I call it like a spiritual hack for peace.
Yes, please. Yeah. I mean, could that be more timely than right now? No, I don't want to hear it, Mike. Save it.
We should go to commercial now. This will be the cliffhanger.
Exactly.
So I'll tell you how I got here a little bit, so I can give people the proper credit they deserve. But I was a guy you should probably interview. His name's Dane Maxwell. And he's pursuing his career as a musician right now. And he's been an entrepreneur. And he used to live in the same town as me down in Encinitas, but now he's up in Boston at school and pursuing the musician's life. But he introduced me to this thing called bioemotive framework. And it's a psychologist up in Canada who developed this over the last 20, 30 years. And there's something called the Netter process, where if you're having this repetitive thought or behavior that you prefer, then let's name the feeling that it's inciting in you. And so first off, it separates the idea of the difference between feelings and emotions. And it defines emotions as like the chemical release in the body that cause you to cry or be sad or angry or happy or whatever. And then the feelings are actually like, in the English language, there would be 9 core feelings. I can't remember the names of them because I started with the 9 core negative feelings, and then I kind of ditched the names after a while because I realized that the feelings were actually what you felt in your body. And so, and it goes straight down the line of your body primarily, which then makes me think about chakras. So it makes,
right.
As a few years ago, you say chakras, I'd be like, crazy. Now I'm like, oh yeah, totally. Chakras getting blocked. I get how this works now. So now what I do is, so what I started working on is I go, okay. So when I started meditating, I was like, oh, I see this thought, and then I get really good at letting it go. But guess what? It just keeps on coming. And negative thoughts just keep coming in, and I'm barraged, and I'm getting good at letting them go. And that does create more peace for me in my heart for sure. But it's still a lot of work. And so then I started going, and then that bioemotive framework that was introduced to me, the idea that thoughts come from feelings and not the other way around was a mindset shift that really helped me out. I go, oh, I'm focusing on my thoughts a lot. I'm not focused on my feelings. And so, you know, we always talk about get out of your head, get in your body, right?
Right.
Well, what's that even mean? And so it's like, it's like, oh, I'm going to drop my consciousness in my body. And if you do that, what you can do is you can actually identify how things feel. You may feel like your throat is tight. You may feel like there's pressure on your chest. You may feel an ache in your belly, right? And these are all things that are feelings, and these are in your body. And so what I started doing is I go, oh, anytime I have a thought that I don't like to have, you know what? I go, what do I feel in my body right now? And I do a body scan. I do a body scan right down.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So I do a body scan, and I go, oh, that feels tight and hot. Okay. And I was naming it, but I stopped doing that. I like to describe it instead of naming it. Like I go, oh, it's hot, it's heavy, it's tight, whatever it is. And then I breathe into it. I just breathe into it and relax into it. And so I started doing that. And I found that the thoughts would just go away when I did that. I was putting my attention on the feeling. And so I go, oh, this is really fascinating. So now I go throughout my day, and now I know what it means to be in my body. My awareness is in how I'm feeling as I'm going throughout the day, not in what I'm thinking. And interestingly enough, I've leveled up. As an entrepreneur, I'm so much more focused. You know why? I don't have the chatter going on because I'm focused on what I'm feeling. And if things sneak in, I'm not like perfectly tuned into my body at all times. A thought sneaks in, and then I'm 5 minutes into this thought loop, and I go, "Oh shit!"
What just happened?
Yes. I identified as this human again. So then I go back in. I go, "Oh, that's that feeling." I breathe into it. Thoughts go away. So I spend the majority of my day not having thoughts I don't like, and the feelings that I'm having, I learn to embrace them. And if it's a feeling I like, then I try to like amplify it. And if it's a feeling I don't like, I just breathe into it, relax, and let it go. And so that's like kind of where my meditation practice is now, is the noticing of the feeling. And then when I go throughout my day, you know, as like I'll be in a social environment, and I'm constantly checking in with how am I feeling? How do I feel with this person? A business deal. How do I feel about this? I care a lot about how I feel about it. That's your intuition speaking. That's your higher self speaking up. And
now you're just working that muscle like crazy. This is actually a fascinating concept I haven't heard, and I'm so excited to like try it. And
what's funny is I'm sharing this with people, all my friends. I've been working on this like maybe the last 6 to 8 months. I've been sharing it with people, and I think I may have stumbled across something that nobody's doing. And so,
yeah.
So I was like, oh, now I need to hide this information so I can. How am I going to make money off of this?
Exactly.
It's the ultra spiritual thing to do.
The most spiritual. Yeah, exactly. Call the ultra spiritual guy. He'll do an episode on there.
It's something I've been working on. It's been extremely helpful for me. I'm 34 years old, and I feel very blessed to have kind of stumbled across this idea and this practice. And I'm curious as to where it takes us. And I would love that if anyone else wants to experiment with this and, wants to hit me up on social media or whatever and tell me their experience, that'd be awesome. Because I think that there's someone else doing this, or it's called something. Like, it's a thing, I'm sure. It's already something. There's no way I'm the first one, right? So I would love for somebody to like go, oh, this is kind of like this other thing. But they talk about this in a lot of different practices. You have your chakras and the energy flows and all this. And I think it's just like, I'm good at identifying blockages in my chakras.
You're obviously someone that is already very in tune with, obviously the whole physical body, and that's a big part of your path, right? Yeah. And what you're teaching, and you obviously people are resonating with how many listeners and followers and so forth that you have. So I find it really fascinating, and it may not be out there, and it may be something that you should take to the next level. Who knows? I know for me, you'll get feedback from me on it, because I'm definitely going to. It's one of those things. You said it. It's like when someone's telling me something, it's like that kind of bell is going off in my head. Or how do I feel when I'm interacting with them? It feels really good. If it feels really good, I want to interact more. I want to follow that. If it's, if someone's telling me an idea and it's like, wow, something about that feels like really like wise. I don't, and so, and of course you have the feedback having done it for several months. So I'm sure listeners out there, you guys let us know, let Mike know. What is the best way? Why we're throwing that out there? What's the best way for people to contact you?
I would say Facebook is probably the easiest. I have a fan page, just Mike Bledsoe, if you look me up.
Okay.
I try to respond to my messages in there within a few days. But that's the best way to contact me.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting this podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on the show Missing Links, the incredible researcher Greg Braden explores all the biggest questions concerning who we are, where we come from, where we're going, by connecting the missing links between science and spirituality to complete our understanding of humanity's history and to better understand the interconnectedness of all things. Awesome, right? And that's just one example. As you guys constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Now, I have a question for you, a couple, actually. One is for people who aren't as dedicated to working out, CrossFit, yoga, whatever it may be. Is there any sort of advice that you would give them? Like one of the things that I've done in my infinite laziness in the past is like the 7-minute workout. You probably heard of it, I'm sure. Like it's like you do 30 seconds of one thing, and you end up doing 14 exercises. And that's been a cool thing that I've done at points in my life where I haven't really, been that disciplined. Is there anything that you would tell? What is your advice for people? The best thing, if they're going to do something, what's the best thing that they could do to take care of their body?
Do what resonates with you. I'm not a hard advocate for any mode of training, really. In fact, if you're not walking, just go for a 20-minute walk.
Yeah.
So
that's
good.
Probably the simplest.
Standing desks. I was at the Bulletproof conference this past weekend, and my friend Kelly Starrett was speaking on stage, and he quoted this number, which I don't know how accurate it is, but it made a lot of sense. He said that if you do a standing desk versus a sitting desk for 1 year, you burn an extra 100,000 calories, which equals 33 marathons.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So here's the thing is, and I talked about this a little bit earlier in the show, which is grade 5 years old, we get sat in a seat for 8 hours a day. When in human history have we sat in a chair for 8 hours a day?
Yeah.
Never. What we're looking at in the last 50, 60, 70 years is a blip, a tiny little speck on the grand history of
life cycle,
of human history. And to think that sitting at a desk from the age of 5 until 18, and then you go to college, do it again, and then you go get an office job and you do it again. And we're putting our bodies, there's a lot of things that are happening when you sit down that long. Blood circulation starts going down. Your muscles in your butt start moving away from, you get a flat butt, and that's because the muscles are moving away from where they're supposed to be, and then that causes back problems. And so people end up in these unnatural positions for prolonged periods of time, and then when they go to exercise, they get hurt. And they blame the exercise. It's not the exercise.
Right.
It's the sedentary lifestyle that's been adopted since we were the age of 5 years old that's done this. So when we're re-engaging in exercise, we actually need to be very careful because we're very fragile. We've been, especially if you're an American, we have so many comforts that other people don't have. And, my advice is probably just to try to gain a little bit of perspective about what physical activity is. Let's get to a standing desk. Let's go for a walk here and there. I don't think CrossFit is the best thing for everybody. In fact, I limit how much CrossFit I do.
It'd be kind of rough I did it for about 6 months. It can be pretty kind of rough on the body, right?
Yeah, and it depends on the coach. Who's coaching you, who's writing the workouts, who's designing the warm-ups for the workouts. I mean, I have days that if people were to see what I was doing, it'd be an hour-long warm-up is what it looks like, Right. And it's it's just me taking care of my body. And so my recommendation is if somebody's sedentary and they don't already have a practice of some sort, is to seek out a really good professional that's going to ease them in and is going to do things like focus on breath. If you don't do anything, just do breath. Just do some box breathing. Wim Hof. Wim Hof's my favorite, by the way. I'm sure you've heard of that.
Yeah,
Wim Hof. He's got an app called Inner Fire, INNER Fire, and it's a $4 app, and it's worth it's so good. It's just amazing.
Really? Yeah. I'll have to check that out.
Totally check it out. If you're not exercising, if you all you did was stand at a desk, go for a 20-minute walk, and started doing Wim Hof, I would be excited.
Right.
And then from there, do whatever resonates. If you want to go to a yoga class, if you want to go do some poses, right on. You want to go do CrossFit, that's cool. You want to go surfing, you want to go running, there's all these things. But, be in tune with your body. And when something starts hurting, there's a reason why. Go see somebody who knows why. And you'll know you're seeing somebody, if you have pain and they don't start with breath, go see somebody else.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, okay, next question that I really wanted to hear your opinion on is the whole, veganism thing. What are your thoughts on, meat versus, of course, was it this year? Yeah, I guess it was this year. The weightlifter, gold medalist is vegan. And of course, you hear a lot of different things about this. This is such a hot topic and more so. So curious what your thoughts are.
So I'll start off by saying my leadership coach taught me this. It actually taught my entire team this. And in an organization, the difference between a dysfunctional organization and a good, functional organization is a dysfunctional organization focuses on being in agreement. And that means that we agree on how things should be done. A functional, well-oiled team or organization is in alignment. And that means that we all can agree that on the vision of the future, right?
The aim, yeah.
And where we're going. And so, when you look at the ancestral health or paleo advocates versus the vegan advocates, the interesting thing I find, because I live in both worlds, by the way, is...
Right. That's why I really wanted to ask you. You're like such a interesting mix of these things. So
yeah, I have, I'd say half my friends are vegan and half my friends are paleo. The thing that fascinates me is that everybody wants the same thing. Everyone wants a sustainable planet. Everybody wants people to be healthy. People want animals to be treated well. And the interesting thing is everyone's opposed to industrialized farming. We're all very opposed to a lot of the same things, and there's a disagreement on a few things, right? And so, I just want to point that out first, because I think people get really heated about this and they turn it into a debate. And it's turned into a debate because we're focusing on the differences and the methods and not on where we're going, right? And I think if we all could go, look, the way we're farming right now, look, we can all agree it's not good for the planet, and it's not good for our food. It's not good for us. It's not good for anything. We could change that, right? There's a more sustainable way. Now, where people get a little caught up is what is sustainable? Like, is eating meat a sustainable thing? A lot. Some really intelligent people in the sustainable farming community believe that having meat eating or having animals that you end up eating on the land is the more sustainable way of doing it. Something like Polyface Farm, Joel Salatin, and there's a lot of smart people that say, look, we can get more total, like as far as feeding everyone on the planet, you can get more total calories out of animals that are eating the vegetation than you can from the vegetation itself. And then on the vegan side, there's the claim that that's not true. And so what I see a lot of times on the vegan side is that there's a focus on industrialized meat farming and no one wants to address what's happening with sustainable meat farming. There's a hyper focus on that and an unwillingness to have the conversation about the other is one of the things that I notice. And then there's the empathy piece and the energetic piece. And so I don't want to eat an animal. So from an empathy piece, I'm actually more on the meat eating side of things. And I think that would shock people. So from an empathy perspective, I think it's more empathetic to eat animals, because for us to not eat animals, I think we have to do a lot of industrialized grain farming, which displaces a lot of it's very harmful. So the industrialized farming of grains takes up so much space that we're displacing a lot of animals. And so if we're saying all creatures are equal, then we also have to consider that groundhog that gets killed while we're growing corn or quinoa or whatever. And and is that groundhog equal to a cow? It's like, and so for me, it's like, look, one cow will feed a lot of people. One groundhog hardly feeds anybody. And so, I think at the core of the issue is we're disconnected from our food. If you're vegan and you have never been gardening and you've never gathered your own food or, this and that, I think there's a problem. And if you're a meat eater and you've never killed your own meat, I think that's a problem. We need to be in touch with our food. From an energetic level, it's, again, was it a clean kill or was it, did we dose these animals with just enough steroids and antibiotics to keep them alive long enough so we can pump them full of grains and then just barely keep them alive long enough to slaughter them? That meat is no good. Good. So for me personally, I've moved from a a heavy meat diet to I eat meat twice a day now versus, the 4 or 5 times I would eat it previously. So I've embraced more plant proteins, more, I would say what I have is more balance. And if I go to a restaurant where the food isn't clean, I just won't eat it. And
interesting.
The same thing goes for vegetation is I'm as opposed to eating, industrialized farm cow as I am eating cherries that were picked in Chile and flown into Southern California.
Right.
It's, if we look at total planetary damage being done, there's so many factors here when we look at the whole system, it gets really interesting. So, I don't.
It's a complex and complicated issue for sure.
So, and then we have climate change. It comes into
ecological. Yeah,
it comes into play, and is there really what kind of farming is going to help make that better, and our animal is a part of that process and so on and so forth. It's so complicated. So I don't necessarily take a side. I like to listen. And, but I personally, I do eat meat. I do make sure I like to know the person who raised it and killed it and so on and so forth. I get my meat sustainably sourced and usually bought from a farmer's market or something like that. I'm a big fan of plant proteins as well and plant fats for sources of fuel. And
what are your thoughts on the health implications of eating meat protein? Because one of the things that really had a big, impact on me a few years ago, and of course, you'll hear arguments that things are skewed one way or another, and I certainly can't argue that that's well within the realm of possibility. But it was the documentary Forks Over Knives, and it shown, basically what this was, all very pro-vegan, and it basically showed that meat protein was the source of heart disease, almost all heart disease and cancer. And, there's this huge study in China that was done and they could predict what was happening where based off of what meat they ate and so forth. So for me, and I do not claim to be an expert. And I, like I said, I'm the first to agree that something, can be skewed one way or another, oftentimes. But it was, that was one that really kind of hit me hard, and I can't say that I went out afterwards and investigated rigorously to see if I know there's people that debunked it for sure and so forth. So just curious what because of course, you've touched on like the ecological, the ethical, then spiritual. I couldn't agree more. If it's like this animal's being tortured and it's like a pig that's the intelligence of a 3-year-old and it knows it's getting slaughtered. It's lived this awful life and it knows it's walking in. It's releasing all the stress hormones and fear and negative energy. But just curious what if you've done much research into that, or what you think about it.
Yeah, I actually have. I'm actually highly opinionated on that.
Oh, good. That's what I want. I want to hear your highly opinionated opinion.
On the China study is not a good way to make any decisions. And the fact they based an entire movie on it it was such a good movie. I watched it and I was just like, damn, they did a really good job. And you got to be careful with documentaries because they're not documentaries; they're docudramas. And it's interesting, but so the China study falls into the category of an epidemiological study, which means that they're looking at entire populations and they're using it's a correlative. So there's an epidemiological study. That means they're looking at a large population and they're making a lot of assumptions, and they're looking at correlations, not causation. And so what they said is over this period of time, the Chinese made more money and could afford more meat. Now, there was the meat that came in was not clean. So we're not looking at protein. We're looking at protein, fats, and carbs. So the proteins, fats, and the carbs that were introduced into the diet were all very poor. So what was introduced to China was industrialized farming. It wasn't protein. Yes, there was more protein in their diet than there had ever been. And that's true. Yeah. That's true with Americans. Like when industrialized farming comes into play, it tends to be more protein rich. That's for sure. That's true. However, it's a correlative thing. Now, when we look at, so nutrition overall, nutrition studies tend to be epidemiological and correlative in nature. And so for anyone to look at a single study and make claims is a little difficult. Now, Forks Over Knives did look at more than just a China study. So what they did was they did a cherry picking lit review. And so they chose the studies that supported what they had. Now, what they wanted to show. And just like anything else, any company can invest in research and then they can throw out the research they don't like and keep the research they do like. Now, there's a different type of study where you actually do control the variables. Now, you take out a lot of the human element there because now you're feeding rats and this and that. And because, or you're doing a study on a single thing with college students and now you're not really controlling the fact they had 12 beers on Saturday night at the frat house.
Right.
It gets, and you're having to trust that these college students are filling out their dietary forms. Well, by the way, I used to do this. So,
right.
So, I was a guinea pig in college and I helped out in the research lab at times. So I understand how studies are performed. And, when I was working on my master's, I took a class called Research Methods, where it basically taught you how to read research. And so what I find is a lot of people who are doing documentaries, journalists who are writing articles, know nothing about how to read research. And in fact, scientists tend to skew the research or come to conclusions based on what their own lens that they're seeing through. And so when I've gone through research myself, I've gone through a study, I read the entire study, the methods and everything, and then I saw the person who conducted the study write the conclusion that they came to, and I go, how the hell did they come to the conclusion when I came to a completely different conclusion by reading the work that they had done? And so there's such a subjective experience that is still polluting science. And so a lot of people like to point at science and research. I'm just like, look, I was in it. A lot of my best friends are PhDs and they conduct research and so on and so forth. And they'll tell you like, yeah, it can be skewed. It's all over the place. And most of my friends that are PhDs that are running research in nutrition, almost none of them are vegan. And so what we do know that proteins do certain things in the body and they don't cause cancer. And they don't, if anything, it lowers the cholesterol and things like that. So it's I personally don't think that being vegan is better. Now, if you go from a really bad American diet and you go vegan, it's going to be better. So my perspective on this is harmony. Like, how can we be in harmony with our environment? And for me, that means that I did, when I stopped competing and I kind of started looking at the bigger picture, I cut my meat consumption down and the type of meat I was eating, so on and so forth. And I eat at vegan restaurants once or twice a week. You know, I go meet my friends and we have a vegan meal and I'll go an entire day being vegan. And I think it's good for me. But most people don't know what it's like to go. There's a lot of people out there that doesn't know what it's like to go a meal without meat. And that used to be me. And I'm definitely, I tend to swing really hard, and I don't feel like I swung really hard nutritionally. I feel very balanced right now. And I think it's good to, when you put food in your mouth, recognize how it feels. Because you know what? You know, I'm come from, probably Northern European ancestry, and how my genetics interact with food is going to be different than somebody from South America.
Yeah.
And to say that this is the right way, health-wise, for everybody is ridiculous, because everybody is so different. What works for, what works for one white male and another white male can be completely different. And so you just got to do what resonates with you. This is the same answer with exercise. I don't believe there's any single method. And the same with nutrition. People go, I have vegan friends that are like, oh, you're paleo. I'm like, no. I'm not anything. I just eat what's good for me. And what I feel is
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that perspective for sure.
Yeah. And I don't go around calling my friends vegan either. They may self-identify that way. And then I'm like, yes, you fall in that category if you're identifying that way, but I don't call somebody that.
Doesn't define them.
Yeah. And I don't want to be defined by how I eat. I personally just want to be a good role model. And I think that if everybody did cut back on how much meat they were eating and they sourced it consciously and they added way more vegetables to their diet. And something I added in my diet recently that just has been very transformational for me is a lot of mushrooms. So not magic mushrooms.
Yeah, you told us this, dude. Every day now?
Yes, every day. Lion's mane, cordyceps, shiitake, reishi. There are these mushrooms have like changed my life. I've been putting them in my smoothies It gets expensive with a lot of these really great mushrooms, but since I was able to drop the label of I'm paleo or this or that, my ability to be open to trying new things has been enormous compared to what it used to be. And I've tried a lot of things that I'm the age 34. I've been training since I was 15. I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm leaner than I've been in over 10 years. I'm happier. I move well. My joints don't hurt. They don't click. I am strong. I move well. I have endurance and I look good. And all of it is about, I'm very intuitive in how I eat, and if it doesn't make me feel good if I eat something and I notice I didn't feel good, I just cut it out and I embrace something else. So
that's a lot of wisdom right there. I would say it's like at the end of the day, there's so much data and information and ideas and valid ideas, or from one perspective or another, that really make a lot of sense. And I think the ultimate judge with everything is what you're saying. I think you've come to a very wise sort of place, and that is, hey, what is right for me? What do I feel like? What is, everything that you've said really throughout this whole show is, getting in tune with your intuition, You have that innate intelligence that comes from your connection to source that is completely unique for you. It's almost like the mother's milk has all the nutrients perfect for that child. It's kind of like the intuition is almost like our mother's milk. And the more you get in tune with that, the more you're going to find the perfect fit for you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And there's certain times where I eat way less meat, or I eat really light because I am meditating, but I'm not supposed to be meditating all the time.
Right.
And there's other times where I need to be more aggressive, or I need to be stronger. And I'm going to eat differently then. So there's not a right way to eat all the time either. I'll go on dieta, and there'll be a 10-day or 20-day period where I eat almost very little meat and mostly vegetation. And then when I come, it cycles.
What do you think about fasting?
Love it. We don't do it enough. So
yeah, it's something I haven't done it, and I know that I should do it. I intend to do it.
That's intuitive as well. So it's, sometimes I'll be on a Wednesday, I'll be like, I need to fast. And that Saturday I do it. So it's kind of like, I'm not marking on the calendar. It's just, I think it's time for a fast. And so I do.
Cool. Yeah. Excellent. Well, this has been really fascinating. I do have one other question for you. Actually, a couple others, and I won't make them too long because I feel like I could talk to you forever, Mike. You've been awesome.
We need to hang out in person.
Oh, for sure. Sure. That's going to happen. So one of my go-to questions on the show is, I love stories of synchronicity or serendipity or a positive paranormal story, something like that. You got something up your sleeve you can
I got a really
tickle
good
our
one.
fancy with? Ah, good. I love that. I love it when someone replies like that. Okay, hit me.
Well, I actually knew you were going to ask a question like this, and I was like, I got nothing. This was like a month ago, but a few weeks ago, something crazy happened. So, Burning Man. I normally go, and I chose not to go this year, and my wife went without me. So she left on the Wednesday before Burning Man, and I decide to have some friends over on a Saturday afternoon, just a nice chill session. And they all leave around 11 p.m. And my closest friends know this about me, which is I have dance parties before bed. And so
that's so good.
Yes. I had the lights out in my house. I'm all by myself having a dance party. And I look outside my window. I can see out my window as I'm dancing. I go, man, there's a light out. There's a light I've never seen out there. So I walk outside and the lights on my Burning Man bike are on. And
No way.
I was like, look around the yard. All right, shrug it off. I flip the switch on the lights. I go back inside to resume dance party. And then I'm dancing. 5 minutes later, lights are back on. So I go,
whoa.
I'm like, all right. I go back out there, look around. And by the way, I live in a beautiful town, beautiful people, and there's not really hardly any violence or anything like that. So I'm not like afraid or anything. I walk out there, I'm like, weird. Turn the lights off. This time I really make sure the switch is off. So I go back inside. I go to bed. I fall asleep. Wake up the next day. Don't think anything of it. I'm just kind of like, all right, whatever. My friend comes over to the house to get something. I go to my desk. I shut my laptop. And behind my laptop is this quartz, this crystal. Mm-hmm. I've never seen it before in my life. And my house is not that big. I know every square inch. And I know every square inch of my desk for sure. And I'm like, do you know where this came from? She was like, no. There'd only been 5 people in my house that week. And so I asked every single one of them, and they were like, no. And I was like, and a week later, I was like, seriously, did anyone do this? Because it's kind of freaky. And everyone was like swearing up and down, like, no, I would not do that. That's kind of messed up to try and play that trick on somebody. I was like, all right, cool. So then, so that happened. So Saturday night was the lights. Sunday is this quartz appears. And so I just throw it on my altar because, why not? And
when a crystal appears magically, it's suitable for the altar.
No doubt. So the next day I'm meeting with my business partner and we're mapping some stuff out and we go to get lunch. And I go to grab my hat. I hadn't worn my hat in 3 or 4 days. I go to pick up my hat and this golden plate, this thin golden plate falls out of my hat and hits the floor.
Whoa.
And I go, what is going on? And I pick it up, and it's this beautiful, thin, laser-cut plate that is Metatron's cube. Whoa. And I could send you the pictures.
Which is sacred geometry. Is basically sacred geometry. For those of you, look it up if you want to see the design. It's incredible, and even the meaning behind it.
Yes, it's beautiful. And well, the funny thing is I had been somewhat introduced to sacred geometry up to this point. Now I'm reading all about it, of course. And of course. And so that was Monday. And I'm like, what is going on? Actually, my business partner, who's like the biggest skeptic in the world, and love him to death. And he just kind of shrugs his shoulders and goes, I'm hungry. Let's go get tacos. I'm like, all right. So,
back to planet Earth.
Like, exactly. He's like, hey, I'm in 3D. Let's go. So so I go, and I tell my so I question all my friends that could have possibly planted it, and everyone swears I'm down. It wasn't them. So, I have these 2 objects. They're sitting on my altar at this point, and and it was funny is I chose not to go to Burning Man, and it was the best decision. I had a beautiful awakening without going, and my wife was able to have an amazing time that she would not have got to have since I was there. And, I've always wanted her to be able to go to that and have that experience without me. And it ended up just being so beautiful for her. And, I had one person tell me, like, you know what, I think it was just a gift. It was, you did the right thing by staying behind, and it was a gift. And here, one more layer to this story. So Maria Chavez, who you've had on your show. Yeah. Everyone should go listen to her, by the way, if you haven't listened to that.
Oh, yeah. She's amazing.
And so amazing. So her and I are pretty tight. She comes over a few days after this whole deal, and I show her the crystal, and she goes, where'd you get my crystal? She swears up and down that, the way it's shaped, because it's got some special shapes in it. She goes, that's mine.
Wow.
And I was like, how'd it get here then? She goes, I have no idea. She was like, sometimes crystals move. I was like, what? Wow. I was like, do you want it back? She goes, no, it wants to be with you. I kept it. And so, you know what? Here's the deal.
That's incredible.
I've seen so much stuff now. What I know is that I don't know. So, you know what?
Right. I know enough to know I don't fully know.
Yeah, I know. You know what? Whatever. anyone who wants to argue with me, just go down to Peru and drink some ayahuasca with some shamans. And then after you have that experience, then come tell me what you know. All right.
Yep. I have a really, really good friend, and we had a sort of a rough experience in a business relationship with some people in the last year or so that's transpired. And he came out of it, and he's done like 20 ayahuasca journeys in the last year and a half. And it's, I've known him for 4 years, and I've seen this huge transformation. And he said, you know what I learned from our experience? He goes, I'm never going into business again with someone who I haven't done an ayahuasca journey with. And I think that's a pretty wise idea. And as far as the crystal, and, it reminds me of a story that, I'll share really quickly as a good friend of mine. His name is Brandon also. He had a dream about a crystal and, where to find it. And he went up, it like literally got him out of bed. He drove, he went to, ended up at a garage sale. There it is. And he, so there's definitely some truth to what Maria was saying, that they like to move around. They're like, what did Tesla say? They're living entities. We may not understand the nature of their reality. They're living nonetheless. And there's definitely some magic going on there. And as a person is waking up to sort of more and more understanding, and like you said, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. But you may know more than you did a few years ago before that first mushroom journey, right? And as you're getting yourself more in tune with your greatest and grandest self and the next version of what you're meant to become, it's like you start opening up doorways. And, I even talk about Burning Man or transformational type festivals where it creates a container for these types of experiences. I have stories, and I've shared them on past shows, that some of which are just like that, just wild, mind-blowing stories that are beyond sort of logic. And here you are in a state that is such a positive mental state. You're dancing before bed. You're being this amazing husband who's like, excited to have his wife go have an experience on her own. All these things that are just, say something about where you're at as a being. So you are in a high vibrational state. You're opening up that container and you're alone. You know what I mean? And it's beautiful, beautiful, man. You should be very, very pleased with yourself to have had that experience. Congratulations.
I am, actually. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Mike, this has been so cool, man. I really look forward to connecting in person with you. And I do have one last question.
All right.
60 seconds or less. What is the meaning of life according to Mike Bledsoe?
The meaning of life is to learn. And it's to learn, and it's to evolve love consciousness.
Beautiful. You had 50 seconds left, and you didn't even need them.
I felt the need to fill it, but you know what? I'm going to
you don't. No. Sometimes less is more, right?
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Usually the case. That's right. Yeah. Mike, thank you, my friend. And for you guys who'd like to connect with Mike, as he mentioned, Mike Bledsoe on Facebook, and of course his podcasts, Barbell Shrugged. Check that out. You do it once a week, right?
Yep. Once a week on that. I'm actually launching my own personal show soon, and it's going to be called The Bledsoe Show. So keep a lookout for that. So if you follow me on Facebook, Mike Bledsoe, and if you follow me on Instagram, Mike_Bledsoe, and then you'll definitely be notified that when that show gets posted.
Excellent. I know I will definitely be tuning in.
I'm going to dive into more topics that aren't necessarily like CrossFit related and stuff there. So
right.
Everyone listening to this probably might want to check that one out.
Yeah, it seems like a natural progression from understanding your story. That sounds like and feels like quite the natural progression. And my intuition says that is going to go very, very well for you, my friend. Thank you so much for sharing. And I look forward to mixing it up with you in person sometime soon.
No doubt.
Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. If you have enjoyed this positive download from our hearts and minds to yours, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on iTunes, since iTunes is the holy grail of all things podcasting. Your good reviews help us to reach more listeners. Also, we would be extremely appreciative if you would tell your friends and family about the show. Our sincere intent with the Positive Head podcast is to spread positivity to the world because we're selfish, quite honestly. I say that jokingly, but really only halfway joking. I'm referring to the good kind of selfish based on the knowing that we all get what we give in this life, because when we give, we're actually always giving to extensions of self, since we're all really one in the same consciousness, just in different bodies. So if you want to be a good selfish along with us by helping to spread the positivity, by all means, please proceed to shout about the Positive Head podcast from your rooftop. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.